Hello, everyone. This is Tumelo Duke Rasabopie. I am from the University of Pretoria's Transformation Office. Some of you may know us under the banner of #SpeakOutGP. Today, I have a guest from the Center for Sexualities, AIDS, and Gender, Naledi Mpanza, who will be talking to us a bit more about the anti-discrimination policy, and the constitutional values that it carries. Welcome to Empowering Voices, Naledi.
Thank you so much, Duke. I'm really excited to be here. It's a bit triggering because I did law and it's come to bite me in the ass again. But looking forward to talking about the anti-discrimination policy.
Maybe before we jump into the interview questions, would you like to tell us about yourself and what you do?
Yes, please. So as already mentioned, I'm Naledi Mpanza, pronouns she, her. I am currently working as a junior researcher at the Center for Sexualities, AIDS, and Gender. I'm also an LGBTQI+ officer at the Center for Human Rights. I have a degree in law, and I've also been growing in the transformation and inclusion space through different projects in the social justice arena. So I'm really excited to take the conversation forward and share some of my thoughts on the Constitution and how it relates to the anti-discrimination policy.
Lovely. So let's jump right into it. So tell us about how the anti-discrimination policy feeds from or draws from the values of the Constitution then.
Definitely. I think even before we go into the specifics of it, I think it's important to remember, at least in the South African context, that the Constitution is the supreme lawmaking authority of the land. Any law students will tell you that it enroads in their sleep, but it's also the document that all South African policies, laws, and legal frameworks derive from. As such, when we speak of the Constitution and the values that are enshrined therein, we're talking about the rules that have to do with fairness, with respect, dignity, with Ubuntu, principles that have been formulated to create an equal society based on the history that South Africa has. But more specifically, how the anti-discrimination policy links to the Constitution is through the Bill of Rights. So one of the rights which stick out and you can use as a rule of thumb to remember is the Section 9 right to equality, which basically says that everyone is equal before the law. This means they have the right to enjoy fully the rights and opportunities that are afforded by the law. And it then goes on to set forth a mandate for policies to be created to ensure that the rights of equality in the most broadest sense are respected and appreciated. So that's one of the ways in which the anti-discrimination policy is linked to the Constitution. The other way is, as mentioned, the right, Section 10 right to dignity, which can be interpreted broadly, but as broadly as you can interpret it. There are policies such as the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, as well as the Hate Crimes Bill, which is currently in Parliament, if I'm not mistaken, which then realize the rights which reflect the constitutional values which we try to enhance, to bring about in society, and through the anti-discrimination policy in the university space at UP.
That's lovely. One of the things that the policy speaks about is substantive justice. Could you tell us more about what that is and how that can be achieved within the university space?
Definitely. So my understanding of substantive justice is not justice for the sake of tokenism, which is when you do or approach a project or initiative with the idea of just ticking a box and getting it over and done with. Substantive justice links to equitable measures to make sure that if a harm has been caused, that there is a process followed in order to ensure that justice is fulfilled and understood, and the parties that take part in the process are fully recognized and undergo the process of realizing justice. So for an example, it would mean that if someone, for an example, sent out a post in the university space and they were recruiting for a position, highly unlikely that it would be allowed if the position, for an example, is as a lay counselor, for them to specify we only want black counselors, we want black counselors that are only having surnames Mpanza, and we only want those black counselors with surnames Mpanza to have done a course by Debbie Bonnen in the sociology department at this particular time, because that would not fulfill a very socially aware way of recruitment. So when we talk about substantive justice, that process would mean understanding what the unfair discrimination would be in that situation, which I'm pretty sure is becoming obvious in my little example, but also in then highlighting for the people who may have been part of that recruitment process to understand just why the unfair discrimination comes up when they recruit in that way, and then also then having a consultative process depending on that specific scenario to then realize what the issue was and how we can prevent it from happening in future.
Okay, so that would be, so from what I gather from you, it would be a way in which that equality is not just there in the document, but tangible and accessible to those within the university space.
Definitely. And also then having these processes to make sure that whenever someone is seen to be an absconder, that's not the language you'd use, but if someone sort of deters from the principles of equality, of dignity, that there is a way to make them realize this, and it's not them being abstractly removed from the process of deciding on substantive justice and dealing with that particular scenario.
Cool, lovely. So tell me, when we're speaking about the anti-discrimination policy, its relationship with the Constitution and constitutional values, how do you see that being upheld right now within the university space?
Okay, so I'm going to be a little biased and say that I am a big constitutional warrior. I really believe in the values that the Constitution seeks to see through. We also have the rule of law, which sort of puts measures in place for different state actors and for citizens and people within South Africa to adhere to the Constitution. So that's just a KVA before I get into the next part, where I then state that UP is one of the institutions that really take effort in initiating policies and then facilitating trainings to bring those policies alive. Some of those policies include, amongst other, the trans protocol. Some of these include the anti-sexual harassment procedures, which really sensitize people to the real day-to-day interactions to make sure that the university space is as accommodating and is free of unfair discrimination, free of, or rather creating safer spaces for both staff and students to interact in a way that has got respect and equality in mind. So some of the ways which I see this happening is my first encounter with the policy was when I got to the University of Pretoria, and I had worked with the Center for Sexualities, AIDS and Gender with Duke, and we did trainings with some staff members on campus around anti-sexual harassment. And although there's that policy, which is how we start trainings like that, we also facilitate conversation for people to really bring in their real lived examples, their real life experiences to help them understand how we can bring the policies alive. So this would mean, for an example, asking people questions around consent, right? And how they understand it based on their cultural upbringings, their communities, their beliefs. And then remembering that we need to also sensitize people to the fact that the Constitution itself says that there are no grounds in which you can discriminate someone based on race, gender, sex. There's also culture in there. So what happens with the initiatives done under the policies, such as the anti-discrimination policy, is that you facilitate trainings, you bring them alive, you recruit staff members and team members to engage in the conversation to help make these concepts, which might on paper look very good, come to life and help us navigate the day-to-day between staff and students and people that come onto the University of Pretoria campuses.
Thank you very much for your time, for answering our questions, and the value you've added to people understanding more around the anti-discrimination policy. And I do think you're a constitutional warrior. You know? So yeah, keep up the good work. Thank you very much for your time. And if you're listening, I hope this has been quite valuable for you. Please do tune in for more podcasts coming up. And if you've missed something from previous episodes, do check them out and catch up on our content. Thank you very much.
Thank you.